Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Oscar Rivas is now a top-ranked man, having signed a multi-fight deal with the promotional outfit. And this has been in the works for a while, so not a massive surprise, but this is a good move for Oscar Rivas in my view. So what I'll do is get to the press release, the comments, the quotes, and then move on to a few thoughts, because there is a burgeoning stable at heavyweight at top rank. And hopefully we get to see some of the different guys who've joined in the past year or so actually have a few fights together, because there's a few good fights to be made. Jarrell Miller, the most recent who joined at top rank before Rivas, and Tony Yoka set to sign as well. So the press release here, see here on screen. So it says heavyweight contender Oscar Rivas, the Colombian-born Canadian-based puncher on the precipice of a world title shot, has inked a multi-fight promotional agreement with Top Rank. Rivas, who is co-promoted by Group Yvonne Michel, will return on an ESPN platform in 2020. And then down to Bob Arum, his quote there, Top Rank is in the heavyweight business, and we are pleased to be partnering with Yvonne Michel to help Oscar get to the next level. He fits right in with the heavyweight picture and has the skills and toughness to compete against anyone in the division. And then Yvonne Michel says Oscar Rivas is ready to send a strong message, as he has the style to beat any heavyweight on any given day. It is with great enthusiasm that we are confirming this partnership for Oscar with Top Rank. And then Rivas, he says, I'm very proud and excited to join forces with Top Rank. I thank Top Rank for believing in me. I also want to thank my manager, Stéphane Lapine, and my promoter, Yvonne Michel, for their leadership and guidance from the beginning of my career. I'm still a bit bitter over the circumstances surrounding my last fight in London against Dillian Whyte, and I hope that one day we will fight a rematch on an even playing field. As for Dillian, I know he will do all he can to avoid this, but nothing will ever stop me from becoming a world champion. I'm ready to take on any challenge. And then it talks about Rivas taking on Whyte, also Rivas taking on Jennings a year ago. So that's one of the guys that's in the Top Rank stable as well, Bryant Jennings, and I don't think we'll see that fight again. Pretty conclusive finish to what was a very good fight in January 2019. But of those comments there's a little bit to unpack, but where I'll start is Oscar Rivas, as mentioned, is currently the number 3 in the WBC. So even though I think for a lot of fans, they may not consider Oscar Rivas on the precipice of a world title, as it does say in the opening line of this press release, he really is, because when you consider that Tyson Fury is currently the number 1 in the WBC, Oscar Rivas is not too far away from the top of the heap in the WBC rankings. And with Alexander Usyk ranked number 2 by the WBC, you could have a situation later in 2020 where Oscar Rivas, almost by default, climbs up to number 1 spot in the top 15, and that would be probably without even fighting. So Oscar Rivas is actually sitting pretty in terms of his ranking, and that could lead to two things. One, a potential mandatory sort of shot, perhaps a final eliminator, or two, just because he's got such a high ranking, there will be a number of heavyweights who would be interested in having a fight with him, at least to try to usurp his position within the WBC. So in terms of Top Rank getting him now while he's number 3 in the WBC, it's a pretty good position for the Colombian, and he could be in some good fights. And if we just go on to Dillian Whyte, before we get on to a few other comments about Top Rank in the heavyweight stable, the comments there around he's still bitter, I mean, that may be in relation to, obviously he wasn't informed that Whyte had failed the test ahead of the fight, but I think more likely that's about the gloves issue, where Whyte actually wore gloves that weren't inspected by Rivas' team. So a couple of pairs of gloves were the day or two before selected, but they weren't used on the night. And Rivas' team protested that they never got to see the gloves, and the British Boxing Board of Control effectively sat back and didn't really do anything on the night, because you may recall Rivas' team very unhappy about that. And it's sort of one of these outstanding issues from that fight that has it's never really sort of been cleared up, but part of the reason Rivas is actually so high in the WBC rankings is at the October WBC convention, he and Yvonne Michel petitioned the WBC primarily on the gloves issue for him to have a much higher ranking, and he did get ranked much higher. I think he was about 9th or something. He'd fallen down the rankings a bit, but after that he went up to 5th. And now, over the last couple of months, even though he hasn't been fighting, he is now number 3. And if he doesn't fight for another few months, say Tyson Fury, he's got his fight against Deontay Wilder, Alexander Usyk, eventually he'll have a title shot in the WBO. Oscar Rivas, his positioning as a result of the gloves issue, it's kind of been a bit of a double-edged sword because obviously very unhappy about it, but it has helped him when he petitioned the WBC, if you see what I mean. But Rivas is a very good signing for Top Rank, and he joins a stable that really is fattening out in terms of how many heavyweights they have. I mean, you obviously have guys like Tyson Fury, Kubrat Pulev, you've got Bryant Jennings, who's been there forever and a day. Ajit Kabayel signed recently on a co-promotional deal. Tony Yoka's about to sign. You've now got Oscar Rivas. Carlos Takam signed on a co-promotional deal, as did Jarrell Miller. And you have upcoming talent as well in the form of Sonny Conto, Guido Vianello, and Jared Anderson. There's a lot of guys in the Top Rank stable now, and a lot of top 30 guys too. Guys that Rivas, who I believe is somewhere between about 10 and 15, I think he can be in some very good fights. And Jarrell Miller, that would be a very good fight. Not convinced it happens next, but there is potential for him to have good fights down the line. I think what they'll do first, because he's been out of the ring since July 2019, since that Whyte fight, there was some talk he was going to be fighting in January. It never occurred. He'll probably get tossed a tune-up fight first. But I wouldn't mind seeing him fighting the likes of Ajit Kabayel down the line, or Jarrell Miller. I think they have very good fights. I probably can't really sort of say Bryant Jennings because he's been there, done that, got the postcard. But it would be interesting to see him fight perhaps Carlos Takam. With them being roughly the same sort of dimensions, smaller heavyweights, sort of broader sort of guys, and they have a similar sort of style, I think that could end up gelling quite well and be a bit of a slugfest. And Carlos Takam, at his, he's sort of towards the back end of his career, it's more than a tune-up. Certainly Carlos Takam is never a tune-up, but I think it's a very winnable fight for a guy like Oscar Rivas. And perhaps Jarrell Miller will not face Carlos Takam because he's been talking about Takam numerous times in different posts on social media. Maybe he will end up being matched with someone else first up for Top Rank. So I don't know, there's some options here for Oscar Rivas and Top Rank, but in the next year or so they got to start matching some of these guys together in some interesting fights. It's kind of like all these other promotional silos that are out there at the moment. You have the PBC, you also have DAZN and Matchroom. They kind of got all this sort of talent, but not necessarily always matching the guys in the same stable at the same sort of level. You end up having a lot of sort of tune-up fights or mismatches. So good news for Oscar Rivas. I think this deal is going to be good for him. It looked like it was always coming down the pipe because it was in the works for the last several months. Matchroom was there in the conversation for a bit, but ultimately Top Rank, through Rivas and some of his connections. Remember, one of his good friends, Elidia Alvarez, is at Top Rank, so I'm sure that also helped. But I like this move for Oscar Rivas in 2020. Could be a big year for him. Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.